Let's talk about the glory days. I've recently done a couple of videos on TikTok about my time in the South African Army back in 1988-89. And I've had a lot of people commenting on that because I said some fairly controversial things. You'd have to go to my TikTok account to check that out. But the point is that a lot of guys who were in the Army around that time or prior to that time in national service, it was 2 years conscription, came back about their time in the Army. And it reminded me so much of guys who remember a particular time in their lives as the best days of their life. And for many young white South African men, their time in the Army was that time. They had a fantastic time. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. But it is very, very similar to men of all cultures who hang on to a time when they regard their life as having kind of been at its peak. And that's often in high school or college, university, related to their achievements on the sports field, in other aspects of life that we tend to refer to when we encounter it in other people as the glory days. And this is something, and Bruce Springsteen sang a wonderful song about this. The problem with it is that people get stuck there. Okay, if there was any period in your past, man or woman, that you regard as your glory days, as the best time in your life, what does that say about where you are now and most importantly, where you're headed in your future? If at any point in life you think that the best time of your life has passed, you are not living, you are existing. And that's really the point of making this video. Those guys who hang on to that past with such tenacity, as I see in the comments on those videos, it's sad. It's sad. And until you recognize that your happiness is buried at some point in the past, and that your projection into the future is utterly colored and somewhat ruined by this sunny idea of how good that time of your life was, then it's very, very difficult to move forward knowing that your best times, your best life is ahead of you. And that's because you have a particular idea of what constitutes your best life. That period in your life when you had no responsibilities, you had power, you had validation, you had the acceptance of your fellows, you had a purpose, which was super important, and you had, perhaps in the case of the Army, weapons, or you had physical ability in the case of sport. And as many of you probably know, I worked in professional sport and still do to a large extent for almost all of my professional career. And I'll tell you one of the things that I saw over and over and over again, and anyone in elite and professional sport will relate to this directly, is how difficult most elite sportsmen and women find it to retire and to find a life after retirement from professional sport. Because I'm sure that everyone would recognize that when you're no longer able to play at the highest level, at the professional level, there are only so many jobs that keep you connected to that sport, right? And this is the same as leaving high school, leaving college, leaving the Army, is that if you were at the top of your game, your professional, whatever it is, and it ends at a time when you're relatively young, there are some media broadcast roles there are some coaching roles there are some mentoring roles. But outside of that, what most sportsmen have to do is go and find a new career. And many player unions' principal work is in preparing their members for life after sport. Because there are, contrary to popular belief, very, very few sportsmen who earn enough during their period in professional sport to simply retire on that level of income. And in fact, many sportsmen continue to live at a multi-million-dollar lifestyle on a $0 income and find themselves in financial trouble very, very quickly. And so they have this massive adjustment to life where they need to find a way of replacing the thrill of winning and losing and the camaraderie of the change room, of the platoon, of the school locker room, of whatever it is, with something else. And they often have no idea what that something else is. And so into that vacuum pours addictions, gambling, promiscuity, womanizing, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and all of these things, because there is a void that needs to be filled there. And this is the great, look, it's complex and it's nuanced, but you have to find a new way of living that isn't attached to the glory days. And that isn't easy. I'm not pretending it's easy. I'm saying this simply to help people understand the dilemma that many young people, men and women, face in getting past what they regard as their glory days. And there are numerous ways of doing this, but most of them come down to a level of self-knowledge and self-acceptance that are not taught to people, because in those positions you are revered, you are validated, you are having the time of your life. And if you think and take on the attitude that that was the best time in your life, it makes it extremely difficult to shape something that takes care of the present and the future if you're constantly living in the past. So the point of this is to help people understand why some young people feel trapped post their glory days, and also to help those people and others in support of them to create a new paradigm, to reframe their view of life, to look back, yes, of course, with nostalgia and joy at those glory days, but to focus on the present and the future in terms of understanding and believing that your best days are ahead of you and not behind you. And you can do this at any age. It doesn't have to be that the best times of your life were past. And I know that that's hard for some people to accept, particularly if they've dropped from those glory days to what they regard as a more mundane existence, where they're trapped by the need to earn a living, to turn up at a job, to fulfill family obligations. In other words, they're sort of stuck in a boring, mundane life, but it does not have to be that way. There are ways of rediscovering and reshaping and reframing what makes you happy and pursuing that. What makes you feel content? What brings you those moments of joy, delight, and ecstasy that you used to have in those glory days that you constantly hark back to? How can you recreate those without recreating the actual source of those from your past? If you're no longer able to be in the army, to perform at your sport, to perform in whatever gave you that validation in the past, you've got to find something new. And there's no shame in doing that, in making that search, in looking to what floats your boat and pursuing more of it. Life is too short for you to have stopped living it at some point in your past and to just drop down into acceptance of some misery in your current position and when you look forward into your future. There are a million things available to you that mean that your best days, future glory days, can be ahead of you. Don't be afraid to do that work. Don't be afraid to put those glory days in a box that you occasionally open and look to your future. To be honest, it's the only way to guarantee that you will have future happiness. I hope that helps. I'm going to be saying more about these things. In the meantime, please follow me on TikTok, subscribe here on YouTube for more content, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about issues that I hope will allow you to find your joy, your bliss, your happiness, your contentment, and to reclaim the love of your life rather than the mere acceptance of the mundanity of it. Love to you all.